and welcome to the Art of Being Human. As we've been talking about violence, I've been searching out what we can do to help to stop it, what we can do to help ourselves to go through it if we're suffering from it. And I know that it's well timed that I'm talking about violence now because of the recent bombings in Boston. When I first started talking about the violence in society, I felt like there was a strong leading for me to do that. And as we have progressed in time and things have happened and Boston has had the marathon bombed, I realized that it was the right choice to do. But I also want to say that I really do believe this is the greatest country in the earth. We have more freedoms here than we would have in any other country. Also, there are a lot of wonderful people that help out, that are willing to help out, that want to help out. And I applaud them, and I strive to be like them, and I'm very appreciative of all of them. The one thing that we're lacking, though, is the fact that this country has fallen away from God. We cannot have complete peace without getting back to God, without getting back to our roots. No matter how much we do, no matter how much we help, no matter how much we try to help others and love others and care for others, we can't do it alone. We can't bring peace to the earth alone. For one thing, God created us, and He is the one who initiates peace. And the other thing is we're not strong enough, we're not pure enough to do it. So I just want to add this. If we get back to God as we should, life will be better for everybody. The country will heal faster. And it's something that I really want to put out there as a person of faith and as a minister. But also as people, we can help to heal because God does give gifts of healing. And this is what I'm dealing with when I'm talking about violence. How do we heal from it? How do we know when somebody's in danger of becoming it, of becoming violent? Is there any way that we can tell? So I'm going to kind of go back and just review a few things here, and I'm going to do it by this chart. How do you know if a child is headed for trouble? How do you know if a child is going to be violent, or is there any chance that they're going to develop into violence? If you look at this chart, this is the way a child would want to be, or a healthy child will be. You need to ask yourself these questions. Does a child play with others? Do they like to be with others? Do they have friends? Do they want their friends around? Do they like to bring friends home? Do they like to do homework with other children? Do they join sports teams? Do they have healthy hobbies? Are they involved with school activities? You can ask a bunch of questions like that. And normal, healthy children love to learn. They love to have children around. They love to have the affection of their parents. They love to go out on hikes. They love to join clubs. They really do love to learn. They love their schools. They love their teachers. It's really kind of an idyllic kind of life. But if you have a child that has no friends, sullen, does not want to have children around, they don't seem happy, they stay in their rooms, they're not involved with organizations, they don't join sports teams, they're not in an orchestra, they're only interested in violent games, especially violent games. They're fascinated by violence. They are often bullied. They often bully other children. These children are in trouble already. And if you watch a child, if you're a parent, you need to watch a child and see how they're developing. Are they developing in such a way that they include others in their lives and want to do so, that they love challenges, that they love learning, that they love sports, all of these things that healthy children love? Then your child is probably quite healthy. But if you have a child that stares into space, that doesn't want to play with others, that wants to be left alone, that doesn't want to be touched, that doesn't want to have friends, doesn't have friends, then you need to be very careful. Your child may be in trouble. And it could be a biological thing. It could be something like autism, but it could be other things too. We know that autistic children have very poor social social skills, it's something to keep an eye on. And it can be a long time before parents realize that something's wrong. Oh, he's just slow in developing. He doesn't like people. He wants to be a loner. And they view that as normal. That's not normal for most children. I'm not saying children can't be quiet. They can't be shy. Some children are. It's a part of their makeup. It doesn't mean that they're in trouble. But there are children who are sullen, and they seem like they're dark in a sense, dark in terms of their attitudes, and they don't want people around. And if they start to hurt animals, if they start to torture animals and innocent things, then you really do have a problem, and the child needs to be evaluated sooner rather than later, because there may be a problem. And we know that in terms of Boston, in terms of the violence that we see in society, there is a segment of people that don't have any knowledge in terms of right or wrong. They don't understand right or wrong. They have no reference for it. They do what they do, and that's what they want to do. And they don't care if anyone gets hurt. They don't care if an animal is suffering. They're fascinated by the violence. These children need help, and they need it fast. So I'm going to take this chart down, and we're going to start what I have promised that we would start. We're going to go into bullying, and a lot of this I'm going to do by charts, but I'm also going to make other references as well. I want to define it first. What is bullying? We've all probably, to a certain degree, experienced it, but how would you actually define it? This is a definition of bullying that I got out of a psychology textbook. It is the repeated, systematic efforts to inflict harm on a particular child through physical attack, verbal attack, or social attack. In other words, a child becomes a victim. A child is targeted. In classes, in school classes, you have certain children that are targeted for violence. It's like other kids gang up on them. And usually they're weaker, or they're smaller, or for some reason don't seem to be able to defend themselves. They are the ones that are targeted to be bullied. They are the ones that suffer the violence. And sadly, sometimes the parents don't know it. A child can be bullied for months. A child can be bullied day after day after day. And sometimes even the teachers don't realize it. And sometimes the parents don't realize it until the bullying has been going on for a long, long time. These children that suffer from this oftentimes attempt suicide, because no matter where they go, they get it. It comes from all sides. If they have an email address, then they're bullied on their email. If they're on social media, then they're bullied on social media. They're bullied in school when kids attack them physically, emotionally, socially, and it just goes on and on and on. And the bullying has to stop. A lot of the violence that we see in society is because children are bullied and they can't do anything about it, and then this bullying turns to rage. I was watching a television show, and it was on one of the major networks, and it was about the violence in society, and I think they titled the show, "Why is Everybody Mad?" Why is everybody continually mad? And it was a fairly good show. It showed about children and what they go through and the bullying tactics that are used against them. But it never really answered the question as to why this occurs, and it never answered the question as to why people are so angry. That was the question that I was intending to answer. Why is everybody so angry? And in the end, one man who was interviewed said, well, if you get frustrated, you get angry. If you get frustrated, you get angry, and then you do something. Then you're prone to violence. But they never really directly answered the question. Myself, I think we have to go back to some of Rollo May's work, where he says, if you cannot change your situation, if you feel helpless, if you are getting bullied, or if other things that are happening to you, it's not just bullying. If things are happening to you in your life, you get fired, you lose your house, you come down with an illness, it can be almost anything, and you feel that you can't change it, you feel like you can't do anything about it, when that happens, you start to feel helpless. if you can do something about it, then you don't feel helpless. You follow the rules, you follow the paths that you have to do in order to change the situation. But if you can't change your situation in a healthy way, then you start feeling helpless. And it is that step of helplessness that leads to rage. And you get a lot of explosive behavior. You get shootings, you get knifings, because people don't feel that they can change their situation. A lot of children who end up by harming other children, they shoot them, they stab them, whatever they do, they fight them. They themselves have been bullied to the point where they didn't feel that they could make a change at all. And when they can't make that change, then they start to feel helpless, and that it is that helplessness that turns to rage. Well, let's get back to bullying here. I want to go over this definition again. Bullying is the repeated, systematic efforts to inflict harm on a particular child or whoever has been chosen to suffer from it. The kids gang up on one child, and they are the ones who are the target. And they get physical attacks, they get verbal attacks, and they get social attacks. So what are those attacks? If they're being attacked physically, they're being hit, they're being punched, they're being kicked. There are fights in the playground. This is what you get. A verbal attack, which is just as bad as a physical attack. What you need to remember is that anyone who is being hurt verbally bears the same kind of soul scars as a person who's being hurt physically. It's some kind of nasty comments and being made fun of hurts as much as being hit. So it's just as devastating to get emotional abuse as it is to get physical abuse. The only difference is you don't have the scars and the bruises to show for it. But as far as the emotional wounds are concerned, it's just as bad for emotional torment as it is for physical torment. So we know about the physical attacks. The verbal attacks are going to be teasing, taunting, name-calling, and you can imagine what children call each other. You stupid idiot. You know, you're no good. You have no talent. We wish you weren't here. You're not helping anybody. Why don't you go away? Now, these things are like darts, and they get into a child or any person, even an adult, and they just feel totally helpless by it. They can't change it, and they become sullen, and they become withdrawn. They try to stay away from people, and it's a very, very bad thing to do. The social attacks, which are also just as bad, they are excluded. Everybody has a party. They're not invited. In one instance I was aware of, someone suggested that they give a party, a birthday party or something, and the bullied child did that. Nobody showed up for the party. And they felt very alone, and they felt very rejected. So it's any way that you can make a child feel rejected, this is something that happens. So exclusion, mocking, making fun of a person, and it's all very, very bad for a person's emotional health. So we have to consider how bad it gets. There is an imbalance of power. The victims are weaker, and because they're weaker or smaller, or it doesn't look like they can take care of themselves, it doesn't look like they can defend themselves, then they become the target. So they're weaker, they're singled out, they can't defend themselves. And a group of bullies will single a child out. 60% of children being bullied have been singled out by others because they seem weaker. So what are the things that some victims go through? Sometimes they have to hand over their lunch money. This has been done a lot. Believe it or not, they have to drink their milk with detergent in it. A child will take some milk. They have milk runs, and they can drink milk, and people will actually put detergent in the milk and force a child to drink milk with detergent in it. They may be forced to lick other shoes. They may be insulted. Practical jokes that other people watch. There's nothing worse than playing a practical joke on a child who's sensitive enough anyway, and other people are allowed to watch it, encouraged to watch it, and then the child is made fun of because they're caught short. What can they do about that? I don't know what they can do about that. That's part of the problem. When a person is bullied, how do they fight back from that? If they're shy, if they're sensitive, if they're quiet, if they seem weaker, if they seem like they really can't defend themselves, then practical jokes can be played on them in such a way that they feel insulted, they feel rejected, they feel harassed, and they're at a loss to fight back. They don't know how to fight back. They also get insulted on the internet. They have internet harassment, and no one is there to help the child. If the child had somebody they could go to and say, this is what's happening to me, and that person stepped in and took action, then things would be a lot better. But sometimes they don't. For some reason, they don't dare to tell their parents. In some cases, they don't tell their parents because they don't want their parents to think that they're weak and they can't defend themselves. And they're afraid their parents won't understand them, or they're afraid that their parents will blame them. One of the problems in child molestation is that children don't go to their parents with it because they're afraid their parents will blame them. And they blame themselves. If I'd been stronger, I could have stopped this. If I could have stopped this, then I would have been all right. It's my fault because I couldn't stop it. So I have to reiterate, and I know I've done it before, and I'll do it 100 times before this segment is over with, but no child is ever responsible for the fact that they have been harassed, excuse me, or the fact that they have been bullied, or the fact that they have been sexually molested. There is no equal power base between a molester and a child. And even in a school situation where you have the person who's the bully, there's no equal power base between that bully and the child that they are bullying. There just isn't. The person who's the bully seems older, stronger, bigger, and the child feels defenseless against that. And if it's an adult that's doing the molestation, the child definitely doesn't have any recourse. They are not strong enough to stop it themselves. They can't stop it themselves. And so they tend to blame themselves for it, but they are not to blame. And I've had to explain to many children that I've seen that have been molested, it's not your fault, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't ask for it, you're not to blame. Don't ever consider yourself to blame, even if you think you are, because you're not to blame. And I will never get angry at you if you tell me. I think if parents would keep the lines of communication open, when they leave the communication lines open and they tell a child, I'm never going to get angry at you if you tell me the truth of what's been happening. I will step in and help you. I won't be angry. You're safe to tell it to me. A child needs to have a trusted adult that they can go to, and they can say, this is what's happening. And the child gets the support of the person that they go to, and the person that they go to will intervene for them. And I've intervened for children before. They've come to me, this is happening, that's happening, and I've intervened for them. There's one school district that I taught in, and I was the guidance counselor for that school. And there was a science class where there was a child that was being harassed, that was really being bullied. And I decided, I didn't know anything about it because the child didn't come to me, but the teacher came to me and said, this is what's going on, what do I do about it? And so we devised a plan to stop it, and we were successful in stopping it. Once in a while, it would start again, and we'd have to intervene again. So every so often, I think maybe 4 or 5 times in one school year, we intervened to stop the bullying. But this poor child had some intellectual difficulties. She wasn't really quite as bright as some of the other children in the class, and so they let her know about it. She also socioeconomically didn't live in a place place where her parents had a lot of money, so she was kind of on the poor side. I would take that child out of the class, and I would just sit her down and talk with her, tell me what's going on, and encourage her to talk with me. And while she was gone from the class, the teacher handled the other students and let them know that what they're doing is completely inappropriate. This is bullying. We will not tolerate it in this class. You will not be allowed to bully in the school. And he kind of really, really aggressively talked to them about it. And it was enough to stop it. When the class was over, I'd send her back. I'd send her back, and I would thank her for the nice conversation that we had, and the bullying stopped. You know, and I have to do this periodically. Teachers need to be on the lookout. If children seem upset, if their clothes are torn, if they don't have their lunch money like they should have their lunch money, if things happen and it just doesn't seem right, be vigilant, look at it. Just look at it carefully. Don't let it go by, because a child may be being bullied and they may not be able to defend themselves. It is up to the adult to defend the child. It is not up to the child to defend themselves. So let's go on from this. Internet harassment, no one helping the child, I went over that. And you know, there are cases where a child has been bullied. See if I can get this paper down. And the parents have never known about it until it's been too late, and the child has attempted suicide. And it's not terribly uncommon for a child who's been bullied year after year, month after month, week after week, to attempt to end it on their own, and they feel that maybe that's the only way. There's lots of better ways to do it than that. So this is what happens to children, and what happens to the victims in terms of how they feel about themselves. Well, they're going to feel anxious, they're going to feel nervous, they're going to be feeling depressed, and they have low self-esteem, they have a lack of understanding, they feel like no one understands them, and as a result of that, their self-concept goes down the tube. But this thing can be treated, this thing can be helped, and I'm going to close it here because we're just about out of time, but I'm going to continue with this next time and give you more information about bullying, how to handle it, how to treat it, how to bring relief to the victims, and that's what we want, because a lot of social stigma, a lot of social problems, a lot of violence in society is caused by people who have been victimized, and they have no recourse except to express it. And the rule of thumb is, if you are hurting in some way, you have to express it, because the body will do that. It'll either go inward and you become depressed, or it'll go outward and you become more violent. But there are ways of handling that. So I want to get into that. So we'll continue with this. Please join me next time.